Thank you so much. Before we came in here, several of you came up to me and spoke in Swedish, and Norwegian, and Danish. So I'll try 안녕하세요. It's such a pleasure for me to be here today. This is my first time in Seoul in South Korea. And the topic of my talk is high-tech and high-touch. And I think that's going to be the big headline for the future. But how many of you have felt a little nervous about the fourth industrial revolution and the future with robots and automation and so on? Okay, that's a large part of us, I can see. But you know what? That is completely okay. And that is what this talk is going to be about. Because I think it's a big shame that there are so many scary headlines about the fourth industrial revolution and what it's going to entail. But I think we live right now in a time in history where all of you guys in here, South Korea has never been more important. Because you guys have the expertise in automation, in robots. You're the country in the world with the most robots per habitant. So you know and you can teach the rest of the world how to actually cooperate with technology and robots. And I think that's one of the big opportunities for you as a society and a country. But I would just like to ask you a question that you can think about. What job did you actually dream of having when you were a kid? Maybe some of you were dreaming about becoming doctors or football players or lawyers or pilots or whatever. The thing is that many of these jobs that we were dreaming about when we were kids, I was dreaming about becoming a lawyer or management consultant, something really fancy. But many of these jobs that we were dreaming about when we were kids, they are still existing today. But the content of the jobs, the problems that we're supposed to solve as a doctor or as a lawyer are becoming different. Maybe some of you are working in tech today, technology. Many years ago, or not that many years ago, there was no education in technology. It's a quite recent thing that we're starting to teach technology. And it's not that many years ago that we couldn't even read data. That is something we can all do with our smartphones and computers today, and that we take for granted. So there's so many things changing in the way we think about work and jobs, but it's not the first time in history that things are changing. And there are no reasons that we should be so afraid. But before we talk about the future, I would just like to invite you on a little trip to Denmark and Copenhagen, where I live. This is my family. Oh. And my little son, Herbert, is now 2 years old. But a couple of weeks after I gave birth to Herbert, my husband and I, we decided that he should quit his very well-paid and respected job to start his own company. And maybe some of you are thinking, oh, that's really irresponsible when you're having a very small child. My mom and mom-in-law actually is. They're very concerned and worried. But the thing is, in Denmark, it's quite normal that you have benefits that will protect you if something happens. And that was actually the reason why we dared to take this huge jump when we had a small child. And the thing is, my husband was actually giving a grant from the state, equity-free grant for his company of 86 South Korean million won. He should never pay it back. He was just given because they thought that his idea was quite good. And he could start out in that way and hire programmers and so on. And during this whole process, we also decided that we wanted to spend a little time with our infants and travel all over Asia. So we took a break because we could, and spend time with our family. And I think that's a really important trend for the future labor market. That instead of looking at these long careers, long working lives, where we're all working so hard and we're looking forward to this day when we're retiring, we're starting to take breaks throughout our lives. And there are so many young people coming up to me and saying, oh, I really want to spend time with my kids when they're young. And I myself, I can imagine when I'm 42 and maybe my husband is starting to get really annoying and my kids are grown up, I want to go to Bali or South Korea and have drinks with my friends and have fun because I can. And because I know that I'm going to work so long up into my old days. Way longer than my parents or my grandparents are. This model is called the flexicurity model in Denmark, and this is the reason why my husband and I could be entrepreneurs and quit our jobs. And this is very characteristic for the Danish labor market, because we have a very flexible labor market where it's possible for the companies to fire people quickly, but it's also possible for me as an employee to quit my job, and then within maybe a month, maybe 3 months, I can get a new job. So it's very flexible in this way. And then we have a system and a very active labor market policy in Denmark where we are trying to push people out into different activities when they are out of a job. And then we have this generous social security system as well. And these three factors are some of the rescue nets that we have on the people. So we actually have this very flexible labor market. But I started out asking you how many of you are a little nervous about the fourth industrial revolution. And I can really understand why. I made a really basic Google search before coming here, and these are some of the headlines that I was reading from some of the big newspapers, and they're looking quite grim. They're saying like robots may steal as many as 800 million jobs in the next 13 years, and they're coming much sooner than you think, and they will destroy our jobs, and we're just not ready for it. So understandably, if this is what we're hearing all the time, we all get a little scared. But the thing is, there is no data that is showing the complete picture. MIT Technology Review started to gather all different kinds of research and predictions that were made about the future labor markets. And maybe some of you can see it, but the conclusion is no one agrees. And it varies with the millions, some of the analysts' conclusions, even within the same sectors or the same time frames. So there are so many different numbers out there saying that we're going to lose a lot of jobs, but there's also many reports saying we're going to get a lot of different jobs. And no one agrees. But one thing is certain, and that is that the labor market is going to change. As I said before, it is not the first time in history that it changed. We were also afraid when we introduced tractors and technology to agriculture in farming. And people started moving into the cities because they were afraid of losing their jobs in the countryside. And it's the same thing that's happening now. But for the first time in 38 years, we have the lowest employment rate. It's 5.2%. And at the same time, we have the largest number of robots and automations we've ever had. So we can have lots of robots, but also very low unemployment rates. And I think it's important to remember that technology is just a tool. It's just technology. We still need people to program the robots. We still need people to market and sell technology and all these things around us. Technology is just a means for us to do something else. And we will always need human ingenuity and creativity. Artificial intelligence is not that intelligent, that it can be that creative and that curious as we humans are. This is one of the most important trends, I think, for the future of labor markets. And I call it that we're moving from a labor market market, where we're looking at people as resources and labor, into a contribution market, where it's much more focused on what can you actually add to the employer, to the different projects you're involved in. And we are seeing that we're getting more and more freelancers all over the world. And of course we have different backsides to this. These two front pages from Time and The Economist are focusing a lot on what the workers are actually losing from being freelancers, like all the different benefits or whatever, paid fruit or what you have in the companies. But we are still seeing that more and more, especially younger people, are working as freelancers in the gig economy. In some countries, it's because they don't have a choice, that there are no jobs, and then they're just starting to freelance on some of the different platforms. But we're also seeing this huge tendency that there are so many people who actually want the freedom of being their own masters and working online, or working as freelancers or solopreneurs. So this is a really important trend. And many of my customers, companies from all over the world, also starting to increase the use of freelancers, on-demand workers, a lot, because they know it's cheaper, and oftentimes it's actually easier to just hire somebody for a project and then let them go again, and then they are on to the next project. So if we're not open to this mindset of freelancing as companies or as workers, we're going to lose in the future. And this is a report from London, from a London Business School, where the researchers actually looked at how many employers do the different generations have. And you see, your grandparents had around 2 to 4 employers. Those of you who are baby boomers, who were born just after the Second World War, you're going to have maybe 4 employers during your whole lifetime. Generation X is going to have 8. My own generation, Generation Y, or the millennial generation, is going to have approximately 16 employers. But my little son, Herbert, who's 2 today, he's going to have 32 employers on average during his lifetime. That's 1.5 years for everywhere that he is hired. So for every generation, it's doubling. The number of employers is doubling. And that is also why I'm calling the future of the labor market and saying that the wage earner culture is dead. This mindset that we have for so many years, that we're going to school, then we are educating ourselves in something, then we are working as this for the whole time we are in the labor market, then we are retiring, and then that's that. This mentality is dead, and we're not going anywhere with our work, with our lives, if we're still thinking like this. A success criteria, one of the most important skills for the future, is that we are able to reinvent ourselves. There are so many changes because of technology today that we have to let go of this idea that we're going to school once in a life and then that's it. We have to practice being lifelong learners and letting go of the idea that we have to go to school or some institution in order to learn. We have to learn new skills all of our lives. So this idea about asking young kids, what do you dream of becoming or what jobs do you want to have when you grow up, it's a little bit absurd because jobs can very easily be automated and taken over by robots, but skills cannot. So we need to focus on the skills that we have to develop in order to succeed in the future. And one place in Copenhagen that's really good at focusing on skills and solving a problem is this building called Blocks. And it's a co-working space in Copenhagen that's focusing on solving problems with smart cities and the urban areas. So this is actually a project funded by the government of Copenhagen, and they're really trying to make the barriers between large companies, the public institutions, and startups And this idea is very much based on that tech cannot stand on its own. We have to have the tech with meaning. And I think one of the most important trends for the future labor market as well is this one. And it's predictive analysis and artificial intelligence. And this is my favorite example of a technology that can actually serve as a tool for people to solve problems and that we can actually use. It's not going to replace doctors or therapists, but they can use it. And this woman at the right is an avatar. She's an algorithm called SimSensei, and she's talking to the guy on the left. And she's asking him different questions like, when were you last sad, or are you happy right now, and so on. And she is analyzing his facial expressions, like is he looking up when he's answering the question, or what is he doing with his face? And in this way, she can actually predict, is he going to get depressed? And the researchers also want to use it for different other mental illnesses. So this is a tool doctors and psychologists can use to help them find people who have mental problems. But this technology standing alone would never help anything. A Danish company that is actually also working with technology and taking technology in to help employers is a Danish company called Danfoss. And at Danfoss, they had a big problem with the performance culture because they saw that their employees, they would like to do really well in their jobs, but they would also like to do really well when they came home to their families. Like everything had to be perfect. So they started this volunteer solution that the employees could answer a lot of different questions. And based on all these questions, they were monitoring how well are your kids doing? Do you have financial problems? Do you have problems with your partner at home? And if the experts saw that there are some people who are actually having problems, they sent in a team of experts to help them. So they actually took the experts from the company all the way to the kids' rooms or into the double beds to help them solve the personal problems that they had. And this is, I think, is a wonderful example of how we're moving away from thinking of employees as just workers and thinking about it as something we can actually, we need to think all the way around and do something really well for them. And another Danish company, Lego, which is really good at doing this, they came up with a report last year called Lego Play Well Reports. And an interesting thing in this report is that they looked at how play for kids and the rest of us is actually helping us learn. And this is what they came up with. I think the most important conclusion for me as a parent was actually that families where parents are playing a lot with their kids, around 5 hours every week, they are so much happier than families who do not play with their kids. I found that quite interesting, and I felt a little bad that I'm not playing more with the Legos. But these are the skills that the research shows comes out when you're playing. And this research was done based on 13,000 families, parents and kids all over the world. So the interesting thing in this, I think, is that many of the skills that people think come out of play, when you're sitting down playing with Legos or dolls or whatever you're doing, are so much the same skills that the OECD says are important for the future. It's skills like complex problem solving, it's curiosity, it's creativity, it's being emotional, intelligent, and so on. So I think it's funny to see how something basic as play, something we're taking for granted, can actually be one of the very important things or cornerstones in our schools, in our way of thinking about work and getting ready for the future. So we have to let go of this idea of thinking about education as a university where we all go in and we're just sitting there and we're listening to a professor or whatever, to maybe looking at is looking at algorithms that are going to custom make education for us. And Area 9 here, they actually cut off 2 years of the medical study because the teaching they're doing is so clever, so intelligent, that they're just taking so much time away from the students so they can focus on the most important things. So I'm also calling that we're moving away from lectures to focusing on the micro modules instead. And instead of thinking about education as something that we have now when we go to school, education is going to be something that we have just in time when we need it. And I just want to give you a little question that you can take home with you and think about a little bit. Because as the ambassador said in the introduction, we're going to hopefully spark a discussion about what the future will bring. And for me as a futurist, I really hope that you would go home, maybe talk to your partners, talk to your colleagues about what is actually the most important trend that is going to influence our company, what's going to influence my work, and so on. Because right now, we have Watson, Microsoft, or IBM's supercomputer that can actually diagnose illnesses. Maybe some of you remember Watson from when it was playing Jeopardy, when the Jeopardy Masters, and it's the first computer that could beat a human in Jeopardy. And right now, it's actually a software program for doctors or hospitals where they can look up different illnesses. And we have Ross, that is an artificial lawyer that can give you legal advice. We also have Quill, that is a journalist that never sleeps and that can write articles way better and way faster than human journalists can. So we're seeing that artificial intelligence is changing all areas of work and life. And it's important that all of us are thinking about, okay, what do I see out in the future? What is it that I have to be aware of? What is it that my company has to be aware of? Because if we're just standing back and saying, oh, I'm a little afraid of the future, maybe if I close my eyes, nothing will happen, then we're definitely going to be the losers of the future. And I really don't want that to happen. My talk was called High Tech and High Touch. And with that I mean that there is definitely no reason that we're going to be so afraid of automation and robots. The future is definitely something that we are creating. The future is not just going to happen to us like just being punched in the stomach and then we're reacting to it. The future is a place that we are creating. We're living in a time in history where robots and algorithms are really good at being machines. They're really good at network, memory, prediction, calculations, and so on. But we also live in a time in history where humans have to be even better at being humans. Because being human will always be relevant, and there will always be need for human skills. And the last thing I want to talk to you about tonight is that it's so important that we dare to make mistakes. And it's really important that we allow ourselves to experiment and do something even though we don't know what the result will be.
Hey, look at you, biscuit.
Maybe sometimes our experiments with technology will go wrong, but I think the important thing is to remember that we have to experiment. The future is going to be in beta. We can't expect to predict everything, We just have to remember that it's okay to try and experiment a little bit. And then I'd say go out and create the future you want together, because the winners of tomorrow are companies and are people who can create something